Welcome to the Dale Lolley Show here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I am your host, Dale Lolley. And, the second round of cuts have come through for the Pittsburgh Steelers as they get down their roster cut down to 80 players here on Tuesday. And got a couple of surprising names on there. The team releasing linebacker Gennard Avery, wide receiver Christian Blake, running back Mateo Durant, quarterback Chris Oladokun, and kicker Nick Skiba. Now, a couple of those names on that list, I'm sure stood out to Steeler fans. The first being quarterback Chris Oladokun. There's the team's seventh round draft pick. And, of course, we didn't get to see Oladokun throw the football a lot in training camp. I can tell you that when he did throw the football throughout the offseason program and things of that nature, the ball does jump out of Oladokun's hands. To me, this was a situation where the Steelers released Oladokun early in the hopes that they can sneak him through waivers and get him back on the practice squad when they put that together here in another couple of weeks. The same thing might happen there with Mateo Durant. I know Mateo Durant was everyone's darling at the running back position in the spring. The guy, he was a Duke product. The Steelers gave him a nice signing bonus to sign him as an undrafted rookie free agent. But then everybody got a chance to see some of the other backs in this training camp, at the training camp level. And Jaylen Warren was by far the better back. Durant also had some injury issues, but he's just a 195-pound back. He looks more like a wide receiver than he does a running back in terms of his body type. He's a taller guy at 195 pounds. If he were a shorter, 5'9", 195 pounds, you'd feel a little bit better about it than a guy who's 6 foot and 195 pounds. Just a little, built a little too slight to play running back in this league, and didn't flash nearly as much in training camp as did Jaylen Warren over the course of this. So I think that running back position starting to take a shape there a little bit, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Steelers maybe try to sneak Mateo Durant onto their practice squad when they bring that together later this year. And then finally, Gennard Avery, that release to me is somewhat surprising because he did start the second preseason game opposite TJ Watt with Alex Highsmith out. And I didn't think he played badly, but he did miss quite a bit of training camp. He also missed a big portion of the offseason program for the Steelers as well. And so it makes it difficult to keep a guy like that around. But again, with the rosters or with the practice squad rosters expanding to 16 players, that may be a situation where the Steelers, when they brought Gennard Avery in, said, "Hey, Genard, we're going to release you now, give you a chance to perhaps sign on with somebody else. But if that doesn't happen, we'd like to have you back on the practice squad because we can keep 6 veteran players on that practice squad." Because I have a hard time believing that Gennard Avery wasn't better than a couple of the other guys that were released there. Maybe they just didn't feel he was a great fit at outside linebacker. I don't know that for certain, but I do know that he's a veteran player. Wouldn't surprise me if somebody else picked him up and tried to do something with him. But if not, then the Steelers I think would probably be interested in bringing him back on their practice squad. But I also think that they signed last week Hamilcar Rashed when he was waived by the Jets. And I think they like what they see there. I thought he played pretty well in the game. He's a bigger edge guy. They liked him coming out a little bit in the draft a few years back. And so I think maybe there's a little bit something there. I think he's certainly better as a prospect than Derek Tuska or Delonte Scott at this point. Although, I think they do maybe like Tuska as that number 4 guy, but that's going to be a position that they continue to keep an eye on as they get into the more of these cuts. And it wouldn't surprise me to see this team at some point go out and sign another outside linebacker, because that's the one spot on this roster that I still see is not quite as good in terms of the backups as some of the other spots on the roster. I feel pretty good about a lot of the other spots. That's the one that still, to me, needs a little more depth And we'll see if the Steelers go ahead and try to do something about that here later in this preseason as we get a little further into this whole thing. But those are the 5 cuts today. They'll have to, of course, get their roster down to 53 players next Tuesday. That'll be after their final preseason game. We'll see who's in that cut. That will be a massive cut, obviously, at that point as they get rid of, 27 players by my math. And, well, my math's correct on that one. So that's a lot of players to cut. So we'll see a lot of these guys are going to be told that, your dream is over in terms of making the 53-man roster. But that'll come next Tuesday, a week from today. So we'll see who's in that group when that happens. I'm going to take a break. This is the Dale Lolley Show here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to the Dale Lolley Show here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I am your host, Dale Lolley. And, I was perusing some stuff on the internet the other day, and I came across Pete Prisco's top 100 players on CBSSports.com. And I know a lot of Steeler fans aren't super high on Prisco. Pete, of course, began his career, at least I first met him when he was covering the Jacksonville Jaguars back when that team early in their existence. And so I've known him a few years now. And I found that his top 100 list a lot closer to how I would look at things than maybe some of the other stuff. For example, the one that the league puts together that the players vote on, I'm a little dubious of that one. For example, Mac Jones was on that list. It's way too early for Mac Jones to be on that list. There's some other guys on there that I looked at that I just couldn't get on board with putting on a top 100 list. But 4 Steelers made it on to Pete Prisco's list. And it's interesting because the Steelers only had a couple of guys on the initial list put out by the top 100 list released by the NFL.com, the players. This one, though, Minkah Fitzpatrick comes in at number 97. Minkah, I don't believe, made the top 100 list on for NFL.com. So that's a good spot for Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think he deserves to still be on there. A lot of safeties on Pete's list as well. So it kind of gives you an idea. I mean, I think that safety position, as I said many times, is a little bit undersold when it comes to how things are viewed in the league. Deontay Johnson comes in at number 70. And I think that's a fair assessment of Deontay Johnson, especially when you look at some of the guys he is just behind on this list. DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, guys of that nature, Chris Godwin. So I think that's a fair assessment of where Deontay Johnson is at. CeeDee Lamb ahead of him. He's a good football player. I've been saying that all along when people were talking about the Steelers shouldn't sign Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson is a really good football player. I think we got to see that to a certain degree in the second preseason game when he was out there playing. You saw a difference in the offense. He just gets open. That's what he does. I mean, he's a professional guy at getting open in the NFL, which is not an easy thing to do. Cam Hayward comes in at number 27 on this list. And as you would guess, Cam Hayward, the second defensive tackle on that list. There's only one guy ranked ahead of him, and I think we all know who that is, Aaron Donald. But just behind him, and this is where I agree with Pete as well, Jeffrey Simmons from the Titans comes in at 31. And a lot of other people would say Chris Jones deserves to be ahead of Jeffrey Simmons or DeForest Buckner. I think Simmons is a better player, and I think he is the heir apparent to Cam Hayward as the second best defensive tackle in football behind Aaron Donald. I did have a little bit of problem with Pete's ranking. He has TJ Watt at 7. And while that's a fair assessment of TJ Watt, I mean, being 7 on this group in the top 100 players in the NFL is nothing to sneeze at whatsoever. The guy right behind him is Trent Williams. The guy right ahead of him is Tom Brady. Those guys are both going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame at some point, in the future here. But then you look at number 5 is Cooper Kupp. I like Cooper Kupp as a player, but I guarantee you, if you went out and polled 32 general managers, or even 30, you left the Rams and the Steelers GMs out of it, 30 of those guys are taking TJ Watt over Cooper Kupp. That's just the reality of it. Watt's a better player. I think Cooper Kupp's great. I think he had the best season, maybe in NFL history, for a wide receiver. TJ Watt had a pretty special season as well, tying the NFL sack record. Then you look at the guys ahead of Kupp. At 5 is best player. 5th best player was Kupp. Josh Allen at 4. Patrick Mahomes at 3. Aaron Rodgers at 2. And Aaron Donald at 1. Don't have any qualms with any of those guys. And it just kind of shows you how good TJ Watt is. I think everybody on that list ahead of TJ Watt, with maybe the exception of Cooper Kupp, can make a strong case in the not too distant future that those guys are going to be Hall of Famers. Watt is on that kind of career track as well. So he belongs in that kind of category as a top 10 player in the NFL. The Steelers getting 4 of the top 100 players. Najee Harris was in Pete's honorable mention. So the Steelers had 5 of those players. And you got to realize, there's over 1,600 players in the NFL. To be in the top 100, pretty special. To be in the top 10, really special. That's going to do it for today's Dale Lolley Show here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. We'll be back again tomorrow. The Steelers getting back on the practice field over at the South Side, the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. And after being off on Monday, I'll be over there bringing you all the news, the notes, the anecdotes, everything that happens over there. Looking forward to getting back to work on the South Side here as the Steelers get ready for their 3rd and final preseason game of the 2022 preseason. And then it'll be time to get real on this and start looking at the regular season. But we'll get to all that here in the coming weeks. Of course, you can listen to all of our shows here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Get stuff on the Steelers, the Penguins, the Pirates, Pitt and Penn State. We like it. We like to cover the entire city with that stuff. So this is your one-stop shopping spot for all that stuff. That's going to do it for the show today. I'll talk to you tomorrow.